Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. My voice for this video is going to sound a little bit different than usual because I am all the way in Japan, but hopefully it's okay anyways. But with that being said, there's a lot of changes to go over that will be hitting patch 9.8. So as usual, if you guys end up enjoying the video, then don't forget to hit that like button. But this video will be made in collaboration and edited by ProGuides. It's a website that helps you improve your overall League of Legends gameplay and knowledge. Check out the link down below. It is now completely free to use. So the first thing in this video that we'll be talking about is going to be essentially a mini rework coming over to Blitzcrank's passive ultimate. So starting with his passive itself first, Mana Barrier. The shield strength has been changed from 50% of his current mana to 30% of his maximum mana. Now this change essentially means that he should have more chances throughout the game when his passive procs to have an overall larger shield proc. But moving on to his new passive on his ultimate, it now states the following. Lightning charges Blitzcrank's attacks, dealing an extra 100, 150, and 200, plus 20% AP ratio, plus 3% of his maximum mana as magical damage. So no longer will he have the passive that just has the random lightning strikes hit something obviously random beside him, which is kind of hard to play around sometimes because you don't really know what it will do next. So this will give him overall more damage and more burst in his kit that is also much more reliable, which I think is a pretty big plus. Moving along, we have some quick changes coming over to Kayle as well towards his E, Shadow Step. The cooldown on this ability has been set to 8 seconds whenever you are in Shadow Assassin form, which in other words is essentially Blue Kayle. Overall, this is obviously a buff to Blue Kayle form because Riot is trying to emphasize this form a little bit more and make people kind of choose this one over Red Kayle in much more frequent games, because at the moment, Red Kayle is just not only safer but also a lot easier and usually stronger to play. Next up, let's talk about some changes coming over to Ornn. Starting off with his E ability, the knockup on this has actually been slightly increased, and on top of this, the damage has also been slightly increased as you rank it up to a 20 increase in base damage. Now, Ornn isn't really that bad of a champion overall in my opinion in the top lane. I think it's more of the fact that other champions are just way too strong, so maybe this will bring Ornn up into the elite league of top lane champions. But speaking of powerful top lane champions, Camille is getting some changes as well. In fact, she's actually getting a slight buff because her base attack speed is being increased from 0.625 to 0.644. Now, what does this really mean for her? Well, her auto attacks are very important to her because number one, her ultimate gives her the passive that does more damage per auto attack, but her Q ability is an auto attack reset, and the faster her attack speed, the faster she can auto attack reset with the Q ability and deal damage that much faster. So at the end of the day, even though this isn't an absolutely massive buff for Camille, I feel like it is going to be a little bit more impactful than one may think initially. But let's stay on the topic of top lane champions for just a bit longer and talk about some changes coming over to Singe. You're gonna notice he's getting some pretty decent buffs actually. Starting with his HP per 5 is actually being increased, which is really important for Singe because he's all about that HP healing and just the amount of regeneration he has whenever, especially, he has his ultimate on, because he runs like a maniac, he takes a little damage, and he regenerates so much. Then you have his W that's also getting an increase in the amount that it slows now by 20% extra, which is a fair amount as well. And his E ability, the mana cost, has just been decreased across the board up to 40 less mana by rank 5, so also quite a decent because his Q does use a lot of mana. Following this, we also have some quick buffs coming over to Cassiopeia, where the mana cost on her E ability as you rank it up will be decreased by rank 5. It'll be 20 less mana. Now, obviously her E ability is something she essentially spams, right? Her whole kit almost revolves around this one ability. So 20 less mana on something she uses that often is a lot, and people might even start maxing it first once again. Personally, I'm not entirely sure why Riot is buffing Cassiopeia. I honestly think in the right hand she is a very powerful champion, but I guess Riot is just thinking that they want to bring her more back into the meta. Next up, we also have some buffs coming over to our favorite tank and jungler, Sejuani. Her W1 and W2 have both been buffed, where her W1 now deals 0.5 extra damage and her W2 now deals 1.5% extra damage. Now, even though it may not seem like it's a lot, since it's only just a couple percent, if even less than that on some of it, well, I mean, don't forget, it is a tank champion, right? Percent damage on tank champions is extremely important because, well, if they build tank and they still have these very nice percent number damage abilities, they can still be extremely effective and actually even scale well into the late game, whether it's damage or just being tanky. So overall, it's a pretty big win-win for these kind of champions. Now next up, let's talk about the big issue, the big champion that everyone is eyeballing at the moment, which is of course Kayle. Kayle has been absolutely decimating games, and the champion without question deserves some nerfs once again, so let's see what Riot has done this time. The AD for Kayle has been lowered by 2, her armor has been lowered by 2, her attack speed ratio has also been a bit lowered, and her passive now upgrades based on Kayle's actual level rather than the amount of skill points she has actually put into her abilities, because as you guys know, if you get the elixir of skill from the kleptomancy, well, you can get her upgraded forms technically a level earlier than you actually should be. So in other words, by level 10 you can be ranged, and by level 15 you can be fully upgraded, which is no longer possible because it was pretty damn strong if you actually got lucky enough to get the skill point. All in all, some pretty decent nerfs coming over to Kayle. Personally, I don't think the nerf to her passive with the skill point is going to be that big of an issue because, well, it was pretty rare to even get the skill point or the skill potion to begin with, so it shouldn't affect too many games or too many instances, but at the end of the day, a nerf is still a nerf. Next up, let's talk a little bit about Fiora. So first of all, we have her WCC duration being slightly buffed, now being 2 seconds rather than 1.5 seconds. Her W damage has also been buffed by 20 at every single rank. Her E ability's attack speed has been buffed by 15%, and her E cost has also been lowered to now being 40 across the board rather than starting at 40 and going up to 60 as you rank it up. Now, I'm not gonna lie, these are some fairly generous buffs coming over to Fiora, a champion that is honestly not a champion you can tread carefully with in terms of changing and buffing and all that stuff, because if she is too strong, she is very much too strong and she completely takes over top lane, so I feel like Riot is being a little bit too aggressive with these Fiora buffs for sure. But let's move on to the next champion, being a MooMoo, our long forgotten champion and jungler. The buffs to him are as follows. The passive damage has been increased by 3%, which really isn't that bad actually. His Q cooldown has also been a decrease across the board, while you can see rank 1, 4 seconds less, which isn't bad, and a quality of life change for his Q as well, that where a MooMoo now follows his target up to 2000 range from where his Q is cast in the event his target moves, like for instance Cleanse, Tenacity, etc. before a MooMoo arrives. All in all, this should make his ganking power much more effective with the Q cooldown decrease, and of course also the quality of life change to the Q as well, and of course the buff to his passive's damage is a very welcomed buff. Next up, we have some changes coming over to my personal favorite AD carry in the game, Jhin. Starting off with his E ability, we actually have the duration being increased by a full minute, so how long the trap can actually lay on the ground, which I guess is not too bad. The E recharge duration time has also been slightly lowered as you rank it up, and the ultimate damage multiplier based on missing HP has been changed from starting at 1 up to 3.5 to now starting at 1 and going up to 4 times. So for the most part, Jhin is getting some kind of utility buffs and also some late game extra damage on his ultimate, which is pretty damn good for sure. But all in all, I don't think this should make him that much more powerful or that much more, I guess, different than what he currently is. Following this, we have yet again the mini rework coming over to TEEMO back on the PvE to test once again. I've talked about it so many times before, but let's go over it one more time very quickly in case you're not aware or you kind of forgot. So you can see across the board his mana has just been increased, period. However, his base damage has been lowered slightly and his attack speed per level has also been lowered quite significantly actually. But then moving on to his new passive now called Toxic Shot, which is essentially his current E ability, it now states the following. His basic auto attacks will now deal from 8 to 50 bonus magical damage and leave a poison dot that deals extra magical damage over 4 seconds. On top of this, Toxic Shots, the damage on this is amplified by 50% whenever there are other poison debuffs on the target. Now don't forget, this obviously includes TEEMO's other poisons, but this also includes other champion poisons as well, like Twitch, Singed, and Cassiopeia. Moving on to his Q ability, Blinding Dart. The base damage on this ability has been lowered, the mana cost has been increased, the AP ratio has also been lowered, but now it's considered a poison debuff again to work with his passive. Now, this is obviously a fairly decent nerf coming over to his Q considering it does lose 50 base damage by rank 5, but it is made up with the fact that his passive is now much more powerful and does quite a bit of damage. His W ability, Move Quick, essentially got no changes other than it no longer breaks stealth, which I mean I guess is not too bad. But then his E ability now is also a new ability, which was his old passive that states the following. After a 2-second delay, Teemo becomes invisible indefinitely if standing still or in a brush, and can move up to 9 Teemos while out of brush. But any non-periodic damage from champions will break him out. Teemo can see 25% further while stealth. Upon exiting invisibility, Teemo gains up to 60% attack speed for 3 seconds, and while on cooldown, which you'll notice the cooldown on this ability is very long, but you can reduce it heavily by standing in a brush. And the final thing for Teemo is going to be his ultimate, where you'll notice the base damage has been lowered, the AP ratio also has been lowered, so the damage is just lower across the board. However, he can now hold more shrooms, and they now become invisible after 1 second and can still bounce on other traps. So the kind of TLDR for Teemo is the fact that he lost damage overall throughout his kit because there's a lot more emphasis on his passive now, which does do quite a bit of damage, so very scary passive for sure. And his E ability I think is a lot more fun and a lot kind of more options you can have with this now as well when it comes to just being invisible and being almost like an assassin, which I think is pretty cool. And the final champion change we'll be discussing is going to be towards a Nautilus. Starting off with this passive, you can see here, not only does it last a little bit longer at the earlier levels of the champion himself, but it also ramps up faster because now it requires less levels to get to higher numbers. But on top of this, his Q ability is also getting a buff, where the base damage has been increased by 20 at rank 1 and 40 by rank 5, and the AP ratio has also been increased from 75% up to 90%, almost a 100% AP ratio on his Q, which is pretty insane. Now some very quick changes coming over to items as well. We have Storm Razor, where the energized effects amplification has been increased by 5%, and the effects decay over 1 second has been changed now to being 1.5 seconds, so an overall buff for the item. We also have a buff coming over to Bramblevest and Thornmail, where the Grievous Wounds duration that this item applies has been changed to now being 3 seconds rather than 1. The first thing this should tell you is the fact that Riot is definitely slowly trying to bring back the tank meta, because this is a fairly decent buff towards tanks whenever they want to tank AD carries, especially ones that have lifesteal. And we also have some changes coming over to Archangel Staff, where in general it now states that you can only have 1 tier item, so you can no longer stack these items on any champion period. And also we have Bilgewater Cutlass, where the cost has been increased by 100, and Blade of the Rune King, where the cost has also been increased by 100, and then you have Hextech Gunblade, where the cost has actually been lowered by 100. Also, Riot has stated that there will be nerfs coming in for ZED, Morgana, Coup de Grace, and other champions as well, and buffs coming over to other champions as well, like Trundle for instance, that hasn't been really released yet, and Gnar and Renekton. And last but definitely not least, we also have some sexy new skins coming out, such as Conqueror Alistair, Galaxy Slayer Zed, and we have Invictus Gaming Camille, Fiora, Irelia, Kaisa, LeBlanc, Rakan, and Evelyn Prestige Edition. With that right there, guys, that's going to be it for this video. There you have it, a bunch of changes coming to patch 9.8 already. If you did enjoy the video, then don't forget to hit that like button. Again, excuse the mic quality for this video. I am in Japan right now recording this, so I am using a little bit of a different setup. But thank you all so much for watching. If you did enjoy, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.